the word on the street is, as part of this desperation before the Marvels coming out, the word on the street is Marvel's trying to get Downey back. They're trying to get Scarlett Johansson back, Iron Man, Black Widow. They're trying to, I guess, just get the characters that everyone loved to come back and do another Avengers movie. So in your reporting, because you are, of course, you work at the Direct and you're reporting on all this stuff. Is that an actual possibility? And do you feel like even just the word of that getting out, is that good or bad for people's enthusiasm about Marvel right now? Because again, that feels like on one hand, people could get excited that that's a possibility, but on the other hand, it just makes everything coming out now feel that much smaller.
No, it's cheap. You can't do that because you have to build with what you have currently. Because if you just bring everyone back that literally died within the MCU, it's just cheap. And I get the idea of it, right? RDJ is wonderful. He is Iron Man. You would draw people in. There is a big nostalgia thing happening with the MCU right now. No Way Home, Deadpool with Wolverine coming back.
Right.
But that's not the direction. That's not it. That's not the way to do it.
What if you brought Downey back as not as Iron Man, but he's going to get the Oscar nom, possibly the win for Oppenheimer. Could you bring him in as Louis Strauss from Oppenheimer instead of as Tony Stark and do it that way? Like, would fans accept as long as it's Downey? Maybe bring him in as I'm sure Chaplin. The IP there is probably in the public domain. So could you bring Downey in as Chaplin in an Avengers film?
At this point, anything's possible.
Yeah.
Anything's possible in the multiverse. You can do whatever you want.
That's the thing. It's a multiverse. You could bring him in as this character from Heart and Souls, because a portal opened up.
And that's the problem with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's the same. It's so funny that the Marvel film division learned no lessons from the comic books and how crossovers destroyed comics and how it got so complicated. You couldn't just pick up Spider-Man and be like, oh, I know what's going on. And then the fact that nobody ever dies, right? And that's another problem with the comics. It's the same problem with the movies, is that when you create the multiverse, when you create these ability for people to come back from the dead, it destroys any sort of dramatic tension that these movies have. Now, when Iron Man dies in Endgame, that is an amazing moment and a perfect capper to his story and that story. If you bring him back, it doesn't matter how you do it. It doesn't matter if it's a different timeline, whatever, here's an old Iron Man from a timeline where this didn't happen. It still negates that drama, because then it means that nothing meant anything.
Yep. And that's the thing. You nailed it. With comic books, that has been the problem, where you kill a character and they always come back. In the comics, you can always write something in, they'll come back eventually. There'll always be some way for them to come back. That can't be the movies. You can't do that with the films. You have to reboot, reset, do something different. You can't keep killing characters and bring them back. I mean, DC made that mistake super early on with Batman versus Superman, then to Justice League. I mean, they did that so quick, and everyone knew that was a massive mistake, and we all know how that ended.
Right.
Yep.
The multiverse storytelling that Marvel has been doing. Now, obviously, that worked in a big way with Spider-Man No Way Home. You had 3 Spider-Man, box office was gigantic, first mega hit post-COVID. And like you said, Doctor Strange did do really well, maybe slightly less than the hoped for, but that was a giant movie. But do you think that the reliance on the multiverse has been a problem for Marvel beyond those movies? Because, I mean, my take is that for a regular Joe Lunchpail, Susie Crochet, or just your average audience out there, this stuff has gotten way too confusing, and the Marvel's trailer, a big part, the only plot that really is given in this movie is there's a tear in the fabric of the universe, and things are switching around, and that seems to have been the plot of the last 4 years worth of Marvel movies. So do you think that as the sort of the main plot line has been a problem for these movies?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it goes back to what we were just saying. I feel like No Way Home used the multiverse in a very smart way. They used it to bring back iconic characters that everyone wanted to see, that everyone was literally dying to see in the fall of 2021 and could not wait to go check out that movie, $260 million worth. So, and that movie was good. Like, they used it in a smart way. They used it to build the character. They still kept Tom Holland's Peter Parker and Spider-Man as the main guy, and just made it boosted and built up his character and developed him in a big way, where he's left off in a really, really cool story. Multiverse of Madness was I would say, the first time we saw where, okay, this is kind of just for fun.
Mm-hmm.
This is not necessarily building the Stephen Strange character with Benedict Cumberbatch. It is just the next iteration in Marvel, and we're doing some pretty cool things. I mean, it's pretty wacky and silly and comic book and sci-fi, and some elements are cool, but in general, yeah. And the Marvels has some elements, I guess, to that, in terms of like crazy ideas and still keeping with those same themes and building, because this is, at the end of the day, the multiverse saga, so it's not going anywhere. It's going to be an emphasis in Deadpool 3, but the execution has to be better.
Right. Yeah, there's something to the way they did it in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, where it was all played as such a goof. It was all played for laughs. And, you did the thing where you brought in all these alternate version, Professor X and all these other characters, and you killed them off. And it was a joke. And, it was a fun Sam Raimi sequence. The problem was to then try and take that and keep treating it seriously after that movie. Like, if that movie had been the last we see of a multiverse in the Marvel movies, I think it would have been fine, because they would have done it in Spider-Man, then they did in Doctor Strange as a joke, and then that's it. I think the problem has been, you're supposed to treat Kang seriously, and there being 50 Kangs. Meanwhile, we've already seen it be treated as such a joke in Doctor Strange. So obviously that's in the weeds, but I do think that audiences have kind of picked up on it. Would be as if you did a parody of Thanos in Infinity War and then tried to have him as the main villain in Endgame. You've already sort of killed the gimmick 3 movies ago.
Yeah, it's tough with Quantumania. I don't really know what they're getting at. Like, everyone in the Marvel space kind of jokes how Loki does a much better job of making Kang an intimidating villain, even though he was more prevalent and actually there in Quantumania. So it's weird. They're really all over the place and building this thing out, and I don't know if they're going to ultimately zag away from Kang entirely.